Second course of action would be to provide assistance and consultation, and then release all records to the client, but seek consultation regarding releasing my psychotherapy notes to the client. Third course of action I could take, again, providing assistance and consultation to the client. I would release all records to the client, including my psychotherapy notes. Now, there was a study done in 2020 by Walker, who looked at a group of 9 counselors. It was a small study, and sharing their psychotherapy notes with clients. And it was sort of a mixed result there. They found that sharing them on their online portal, produced good results by their measurements. But then they were shocked to find that when they asked the counselors to share their psychotherapy notes in person or during the session, most of those 9 counselors were very, very hesitant to do so. A lot of them had inner quarrels about HIPAA and patients' privacy. So step 5A is potential consequences of the action. So first course of action, consequences. The client could think I'm withholding my psychotherapy notes for malicious reasons. As evident in the video, she became very visibly frustrated, and she could think that this is just a tit for tat type game here, that I'll give you all your records, but except for this, because I'm acting in that authority position. This could harm and create an impetus for the client to file a complaint. I say this because if I had zero education on this and the counselor says, hey, I can give you this, but I'm not going to give you that, I might look at that as a personal slight and might give me the impetus to go file a complaint against the counselor. As far as consequences with a second course action, again, the client could think I'm withholding for malicious or punitive reasons. The client might show acceptance for a consensus decision. So the the client might think that there is, a good that could come from reaching out to different sources, and that's not just on me to make that decision. That at least I'm removing myself from this frustrated setting here. I'm trying to get a multitude of opinions and then come back and make a final decision. On the flip side of that, you have the client who could think that all counselors think the same. They're all the same. All lawyers are the same. All doctors are the same. All counselors are the same. Therefore, it could remove any perceived utility. Third course of action, consequences that are there. The client will be conceded to receive all records, including my psychotherapy notes. So I would assume that the client would be elated, sort of like a thank you. Thank you for honoring this. This is what I wanted. Why was that so hard? However, the client could be harmed by the content of psychotherapy notes. As Belize 2019 discussed there. So in Belize 2019, it was another study with a small sample size of counselors looking at sharing therapeutic or psychotherapy notes and seeing if there's any benefit there. In their conclusion, that they really talked about the limitations there, that even though there's a multitude of these small studies out there and they're self-report studies, that there is just not enough evidence out there to say that disclosing the psychotherapy notes would be a net good, and in fact that it could lead to anxiety or furthering of mental health issues for the client. So step 5B, action chosen. So the action I chose was the second course of action. So I will respect the client's autonomy and my fidelity. So the client wants to end the relationship, I would not stop her at all. I would help facilitate that and be as courteous and ethical as possible. And the fidelity issue is honoring my commitment to that and being forthright with her. I'll give all medical records to my client minus psychotherapy notes. And I will provide assistance and consultation interpreting my client's counseling records, going back to B.6.A, I think it was. And then I will inform my client that I will consult with my peers, supervisors, and organizations regarding the disclosure of my psychotherapy notes. Finally, I will communicate my decision to my client. So step 6, evaluate course of action. So do any ethical dilemmas still exist after I pick my course of action? And in this situation, I think yes, and that is the moral principle of non-maleficence. So, in my view of all this, there is harm, potential harm, going both ways. So, one way, we release the psychotherapy notes to the client. That presents the issue of maybe 4 or 5 words, maybe just one sentence that have no context at all. And therefore, the client can map onto that note however they're feeling. And coming from that situation right there, where there's a lot of frustration and tenseness, this could further cause harm, emotional harm, maybe not that day, but down the road. You never know how, where a drop in the water, how it can affect things. And then there's not receiving the psychotherapy notes. So again, she leaves, she might feel deflated, that the counselor, all counselors are bad because it was a tit for tat, and that counselor wanted to exercise authority by not giving me this record, and I'm entitled to everything. And, who knows where the dominoes may fall on that one. So, test of justice. As far as that goes, I would say my course of action would be the same for any client. I don't care who it was. If I was blind, it does not matter. I would act the same with any client. Test of publicity. So if this made its way into the public and the newspapers, if this was the biggest story in the entire world, I would confidently stand behind my decision. And then finally, a test of universality. I would recommend my course of action to all counselors in this situation, although I do note at the bottom there that not all counselors write or keep their psychotherapy notes. I know of one counselor in particular that throws away their psychotherapy notes as soon as the session is done. So just a little limit there on the universality. And finally, step 7, implementation. So how I would implement this is, first, I will retrieve, transfer, and provide consultation regarding the client's records. I will get them, transfer them to her, and then, as we'll see in the second one, I will go through it all. Then I will act with fidelity, explaining that my psychotherapy notes will be withheld. Then I will retrieve state and federal codes to aid my decision if I get any feedback there. I would probably need to do this because I doubt I'm going to receive, this is just my inference, that, an empathetic, oh, I see why you're not giving me the psychotherapy notes. I completely understand. I doubt that to be the case, but it'd be nice to have the state and federal codes with me to show her how I'm acting in a legal and ethical way. Next would be, I'll explain that my decision is temporary and that I will seek out consultation. I will tell her that this is not final, that this is an ethical dilemma for me, and that there's a process I need to go through in making this decision. And part of that is seeking out consultation from my peers, supervisors, or any organizations. And then I'll explain why I'm making this decision, again, because it's an ethical dilemma. And then I will ask the client the best way to communicate my final decision to her. So whether that's phone number or anything, or email. I'll also ask the client an appropriate location and date to transfer the notes if that's the decision I do make. And then finally, I will set up a transition of care plan for my client if my client wants that. If my client is planning on seeing another counselor, I'd be more than willing to do that. Again, acting as a person in my profession should. I want to thank everybody. This class has been amazing, and have a good summer.